Good morning, guys. I am so happy to be back home and here with you this morning. The last time I was here was when I graduated. And I remember that morning specifically because my mom and I had a bet. If I could walk across the stage, not this one, the one in the gym, but if I could walk across the stage and maintain the utmost composure and also direct eye contact with the principal who was handing out diplomas, and here was the catch, right? Here's the caveat. Do that without busting out into a fit of laughter, then she'd give me 20 bucks. That was the bet. Now mind you, very safe bet for my mother because she knew full well I had zero poker face, none. And also, she knew full well that the night before graduation, a group of us had ventured down the hill in McDaniel Allotment, where we lived. It was a graduation party the night before. And she knew a group of us, including Becky, went down the hill to the front porch of the principal's house. Now, this is probably the point in the story where my mom's selective memory kicks in. It's for sure the point in the story where I choose to leave out a lot of the details. But what I can tell you I remember is that I ran track and cross country in high school, but that night, I ran like it was the Olympic trials. Out of there. It has been quite a journey since then. The journey. We are all on one. We all start out somewhere, many of us from right here. We're all going somewhere. We're all going to end up somewhere. There's a whole lot of life that happens in between, isn't there? Journeying, as an example, from the parking lot on one hypothetical day, when you hypothetically skip school to go see an Indians game, it's one kind of journey. It's altogether another kind of journey over the life, right? That, you guys, is the long game. That's the overarching narrative of your own story. So my Cleveland sports loyalties and my hometown loyalties aside, your curriculum director, Mrs. Miller, had to do some selling on her part so I could even be here with you this morning. She calls me a couple months ago and asks me if I want to be here, and I say yes. I immediately say yes because that's always my answer when it has anything to do with home. So we're talking, we agree to this, we're catching up, and towards the end of the conversation, she says, wait, do you have like a website, or videos, or pictures, something that I can show to people? And I'm smiling on the other end of the phone because I knew what she was getting at, right? She's like, are you sure you're okay with this? She had to like substantiate that I could stand up here and talk. So I wait for her to finish. And I just say, Beck, you've known me for 40 years. Have you ever known me not to talk? It's okay, right? I mean, but it's interesting, isn't it? The tendencies that we've always had, things that excite us, the things that make us who we are, those are things I've come to understand the older that I've gotten. They can't be learned. You can't teach those things. They cannot be taught. In fact, it was Galileo who said, you can't teach a man anything. You can only help him find it within himself. So since the time I walked across that stage 28 years ago, all right, where are my math teachers? Because I need some help with that math. 28 years I walked across that stage, and since the time I graduated, and for sure my whole K through 12 years here, I did try to unlearn the things about myself that I always knew to be true. I tried to disconnect from those things, to disbelieve those things, and sort of take on the labels that were assigned. Why would I do that? Well, I did that for the same reason that most kids do that in their formative years, the same reason that humans do that in their human experience. So that other people around us will be more comfortable, so that other people's will be nicer and more inclusive of us, right? So you do it oftentimes to get through school. But who somebody is inherently at their core is something that we all absolutely categorically know from a very early age. Doesn't have to be taught. New information can be taught. New information about old things, right? History can be taught. New concepts, new ideas, new perspectives can be taught. New ways to show your work when solving a math equation can be taught. All sorts of new things can be taught by others, adults, and learned by students. But who somebody is, can't be. However, what it must be is fostered through the act of teaching. So as I walked these halls all those years ago, life taught me what to do to fit in here, right? So it kind of taught me what to do. And I'll tell you why, because Eleanor Roosevelt, who's my favorite president, Mr. Evans, I think, taught me that. Or maybe not. He was one of my favorite teachers of all times, and Eleanor Roosevelt, one of my favorite first ladies of all times. But here's what she said about life. All of life is a constant education. All of life is a constant education. All right, man, how I know that to be true. Because when I walked these halls, life here constantly taught me what I needed to do to fit in, to not get tossed into lockers or run in my mouth. The voice on the other end was one of my former neighbors. Her name was Laura, and she was a doctor. And I could tell as soon as I picked up the phone that whatever she was about to tell me wasn't good. So I did some selling on my own part. I was like, Laura, I'm not going to get in the car and drive all the way over there. Just please tell me what it is that you need to tell me. And she said, you have leukemia. There's no cure. You're probably not going to make it. So after you hear that you have cancer, the words after that are sort of distant. They're very far away. You can't quite process everything. At least I couldn't. All I could think about was that Olivia was going to grow up without a mom. She would never know me. She would never know where I came from. So I knew I just needed to go scoop her up. So I got in my car. I was on my way to drive across town to get her. But I made one stop on my way. I stopped at the Catholic Church. Too weak in that moment to pray. I was just numb. But what I also was comforted by my roots. Because being in the back of that local Catholic church was the closest thing I could get to right here in Minerva, Ohio. St. Gabriel's on High Street. St. Gabriel's, where I made my first communion. St. Gabriel's, where I was confirmed. St. Gabriel's, where I stole their rectory wine. I mean, it was the closest thing I could get to being back home. Because when things look bleak and scary and unknown up ahead, you look back. You need home. About a month before I went in for a bone marrow transplant in Cleveland, my phone rang again. This time it was a very different voice. Is this my favorite point guard? And it was Coach Leatherberry. But Coach Leatherberry was on the other end of that phone. And 7 years it had been since I'd neither seen him, nor spoken to him, or thought about him, not since our 20-0 senior year season. All right, maybe it was 19-1 because I still hate Louisville to this day. 20-0, we'll go 20-0. 7 years since I had seen him. I mean, you know, he was the same voice that I heard when he was my teacher and my coach. He would ask me other sorts of questions, like things that mattered to me. Hey, how's your family? Hey, how's track? Hey, how's cross country? How are Beth, Becky, and Chelsea? 7 years it had been since I had seen him or spoken to him, and now he's on the phone during one of the darkest seasons in my life. I mean, 28 years later, I still can't tell you what subject coach taught. I think it was science. But what I can tell you unequivocally is what I learned from him. That I mattered. I learned, he taught me that I mattered, that my life, hanging by a thread in that moment, had value. My coach, my teacher, taught me that the amount of effort poured into relationships, the amount of time spent fostering students had much longer lasting and much further reaching implications than anything I ever learned in a textbook, science or otherwise. Coach Leatherberry fostered my competitiveness, my leadership, and my constant mouth running abilities, helping me to see those things as positives instead of what other people and their labels and expectations had taught me were negatives. He took the time to help me see things differently. And instead of wanting to bench me or just be done with me altogether, he instead fostered our relationship, building trust and mutual respect, so much so that while he was doing it, the only thing I may have understood at the time that he was doing was teaching me how to run a motion offense or whatever it was I needed to learn about science. Instead, he was teaching me something so much greater something of invaluable and inexplicable importance. That by understanding and accepting who you are, you can channel those characteristics into something that can be used throughout the rest of your life in meaningful ways. And not just to help yourself during times of trouble, but to help others on their journeys and their times of need. Coach Leatherberry showed up. He never gave up on me or anybody else in his classrooms or on his teams. And while, as a bratty teenage girl, super bratty, I apologize to a lot of you when I walked in here. While I was a teenager, I may not have understood what he was doing or appreciated then, but I understand now as an adult. Life makes you understand, because all of life is a constant education. Which brings me to this point. Well, we forever have a sense of home, a deep-seated root system, right, that serves as our undergirding and our navigational system as we go throughout the rest of our life. We are not, in total, products of our environments. Rather, we are products of expectations that we learn in our environments. And by expectations, I mean that synonymously as they often are with labels. And again, where do they come from? They come from home. They come from our roots. They come from right here. You all, each and every one of you, have such unbelievably important jobs. And I know you guys probably hear that all the time, right? From non-educators, from people who have no idea what it's like to be in the actual trenches. People who might say, man, how do you drive a bus with the noise? How do you do this every day? You might hear it from parents who aren't active in their children's lives. They tell you, good job, because they're not doing their jobs at home. I know you've heard it before. But I want you to hear it this morning with new ears. Your jobs are not jobs at all. They're life's work. A job is an occupation, a source of income, a career, but your work happens when care and passion align with life's greatest needs. There's no greater need in life than letting humans know that they're loved. Little humans who turn into big humans with big dreams and big goals, all of whom started out right here, under your care and under your guidance, under your expectations. If all of life is a constant education, then we must constantly show up, right, to encourage students. We must constantly do that, because what you believe about your students matters, but not just what you believe about them. What you believe about yourselves in that role matters. Because again, if all of life is such a constant education, then we have to show up to constantly guide them and educate and lead by example and mentor during a time when the world seems a lot scarier than it did when we were young. Because those students are all going to grow up and remember. They're going to remember where they came from. They're going to remember their roots. They're going to remember home. But most of all, they will remember if they matter. If they matter in life's story. If they mattered in your story. They mattered at all. Now, they may or may not remember what they got on their ACT or their SAT. They will definitely remember if somebody took the time to tell them throughout the course of a day, you guys can do this. I believe in you. I know you can do this. They will remember home when they are far from it. 7 hours, 7 states, 7 continents away. They will remember home when they're facing all of life's unknowns, staring all the fear, right, of the unknown right in the face, loss and love and hurt and sickness, all of life's things. They will look back and remember home. And I want you guys to hear me when I say this. There's literally not one way to remember home without remembering school, without remembering being right here, surrounded by adults, teachers, educators every day who have a choice to make as to whether they're going to forever show up and be a part of somebody's journey or not. They will remember your choice. They will never forget that. I've always remembered. I grew up here. I lived here, I learned here, I loved here. I lived a lot of life in the village of Minerva. The remembering of it all allowed me to get through a time when not only I wasn't supposed to live it all, but it continues to inform my life today, many, many years later. So, if you guys ever think, what's the point? What will what I do every day matter? It does. It absolutely does. You know, today I live in Grand Rapids, Michigan, cancer-free. But I live in Grand Rapids, thank you. Which is the enemy state, by the way. It's really hard for a Buckeye through and through to live in Michigan, but it's actually kind of beautiful. We fly the flag, right? High state flag in the driveway. But it matters, this whole journey. I never expected that's where I would be. I'll tell you that right now. Growing up here, doing the things I was doing, never expected that my life would be what it is today. Never expected when people showed up when I was a teenager for it to matter and make such an impression on me as it does today. But in Grand Rapids, I wear many hats, mostly tribe, Cavs, Buckeye hats. But I do a lot of things. I volunteer for the Leukemia and Lymphoma Society for a nationwide campaign that raises funds to find a cure and to help patients and their families who are going through that diagnosis. I teach and preach at local homeless shelters and ministries. And this is how funny it is. I don't know how many of you actually knew me when I grew up. But I went to my 20th year reunion. This is exactly what they said to me. One, you're alive? Yep. I don't know if they were like wishing, I don't know. But then secondly, it was, are you a Jesus freak now? It was the funniest question of all time because they knew a 14-year-old girl, right? As a 14-year-old girl, as a 16-year-old girl, not the girl that they know today. That is what I'm trying to share with you, that while you don't necessarily know what you're doing in the moment, how it's going to affect somebody, it all matters. That whole journey matters. I teach and I preach in local prison ministries and shelters, and interestingly, I actually had a 25-year sales career that also has kind of gotten in the way of my volunteering and my real life, apparently. But I just went on a sabbatical, a hiatus really, so I could go back and start a speaking and coaching program for girls so that they could, girls and women on their journeys, so they could make decisions based on who they truly are and not what life and expectations have sort of taught them otherwise. But if you guys think that what you do every day doesn't matter, like what's the point? Those thankless things, the seemingly small and repetitive, right, the mundane things, if you think that those things don't matter, I am standing here alive today to tell you that they do. So I say, choose to show up. Choose to mentor. Choose to foster relationships. Choose to smile, right? Your face might be the only smiling face that a student sees all day long. Choose to find the good in every problem child and every labeled child. You may be the only person in their life that gives them any sort of semblance of self-confidence, of self-esteem, of reasonable expectations. And lastly, choose to guide and educate your students. Your constant guidance and education of them might be the one difference between them choosing to give up on life and living it. So while we are all on this journey of life together, let's love a little deeper. Let's show up in ways that matter. And let's encourage one another to be who we were created to be. Because the best is always yet to be. As long as you have somebody to remind you of that along the way. Blessings to you guys on your school year. I hope it's a good one. Thank you.